We've got a lot of great movies to talk about this week, and not one of them has been impacted by tariffs. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good sense of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. And this week, the subgenre that we're looking at is Chinese horror. And this comes from our Horror Movie Supplement, which is 100 additional subgenres to the original 100 subgenres on the Horror Movie Syllabus. And the supplement was meant to explore some different, newer or more niche or more offbeat subgenres of horror. And in this case, Chinese horror isn't really necessarily so much offbeat, so much as it's lesser focused on or maybe less prolific or definitely less celebrated than other regions such as Japan, just Southeast Asia in general, Australia, Korea, like all of these other areas that have a lot of buzz about them from their horror movie industry, from their horror genre releases. China doesn't really get that quite so much. And it's interesting. And I imagine some of it has to do with the political situation in China. Now, full disclosure, I'm no expert on China, Chinese culture, Chinese politics, Chinese geography, any of that. I'm pretty new to all of this. So I don't really know for sure if that's what it is. But I do know that when we talk about Chinese horror, we're also going to be looping in Hong Kong and Taiwan. Now, I know enough to know that there is a geopolitical aspect to this that makes that maybe slightly controversial. But when you look at Chinese horror, like when you do research on it, when you look up the best Chinese horror, you're getting a lot of movies from Hong Kong and a lot of movies from Taiwan. So we have to kind of include them. So we're going to include them here. Again, no commentary or position being taken on Chinese politics. But when we're talking about Chinese horror, we're talking about China, we're talking about Hong Kong, we're talking about Taiwan. We're going to include all of that in there. And just because we're going to have some really good movies from those regions. So to leave them out would be a travesty, really, because we'd be ignoring some of the best that Chinese horror has to offer. And that's what we're looking at today. Chinese horror may not be super prolific or as celebrated as some of the other Asian countries' horror releases, but it has, the cream of the crop is good stuff. It's really good stuff. And that's what we're focusing on today, is some really, really good stuff that some of which you may not be super familiar with, because again, it doesn't seem like, at least here in the States, it doesn't seem like it gets the same kind of buzz as Korean horror, Japanese horror, J-horror, etc. So we're going to go ahead and focus on that, and we're going to focus on them in order of like how notorious they are. At least, again, from a U.S. perspective, how notorious these movies are, how well known, and how much of a reputation they have. That's how we're going to do it in increasing order, undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate, in increasing order of notorious reputation. So go ahead and get in line, because we're going to go ahead and start exploring these Chinese horror movies. The first Chinese horror movie we're looking at today, the undergraduate level selection, is The Eye. The Eye came out in 2002 and was directed by the Pang brothers, a twin brother duo that directed this movie and is pretty much famous for directing this movie and other movies in the franchise, as well as some other notable movies. Bangkok Dangerous is one that some of you might have heard of. So they're pretty well known. And this movie, I would argue, is possibly one of the best known Chinese horror movies, at least again in the United States, partly because of a U.S. remake that is, well, we'll get into that in just a minute. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a blind concert violinist who undergoes a cornea transplant to get her vision back. And she does get her vision back slowly, but while she's starting to recuperate and learn how to see for the first time in years and years, she starts to get visions that are strange and unexplainable. Visions that seem to be ghosts and maybe premonitions of dangerous things that are going to happen in the future or dangerous things that have happened in the past. And as she tries to unravel this mystery and prevent herself from going insane, hijinks abound. And we're going to go ahead and stop there so as not spoil the movie, of course. But this movie is interesting because it starts out as, well, kind of like a J-horror movie, really, if I'm being honest with you. The whole aesthetic of it, the whole vibe of it, the whole concept of it even feels a little bit like J-horror. And I don't think that that's necessarily just like me being kind of reductive and calling everything that's Asian the same thing or something like that. It really does seem to have that similar aesthetic and vibe, and it even has like a pan-Asian cast. Like all of the actors aren't Chinese; they're from different areas, different regions in Southeast Asia, and so it does kind of have a little bit more of a universal appeal, and maybe not quite so specifically a Chinese appeal, but it does still lean into ideas of superstition and supernaturalness, which is a theme we're going to see throughout pretty much almost all the movies that we're going to talk about today. These supernatural aspects to the movie, and this movie does have a really good concept. The idea that somebody gets a cornea transplant and then gets the visions that the previous owner of the corneas had is a really strong idea. It's a really cool concept. It sets up a really fun mystery aspect to it, and it follows through on that fairly well. It's a pretty solid mystery. The execution of the movie is maybe arguably a little bit rote. Like I said, it does feel a little bit like a J-horror movie in a good way, but also in a bad way in the sense that you can't help but compare it to some of the greatest of the J-horror movies. And I don't think that it's subpar to those, but I don't think it's as good as those either. And so the comparison does make it suffer a little bit, but only a little bit. Overall, the filmmaking from the Peng brothers is solid. There are some very effective, creepy scenes in the movie. Not all of them work for me. Like the elevator scene, for example, is one that kind of fell a little bit short for me in terms of the creep factor, or scare factor. And there are some jump scare stuff that doesn't really work for me super well as either. But for the most part, I thought when the movie was trying to be creepy, it was doing creepy pretty well. When it was trying to be charming, it was maybe a little less successful, and that's maybe where some of the rote execution comes in. There's a kind of a love story aspect to this movie that falls a little flat for me. I don't feel like the two leads have a whole lot of chemistry, and I feel like their meet cute and their subsequent romance is a little rushed. It kind of happens fast for me. Like the lengths to which this guy goes to try to help this woman is a little far-fetched considering how little he's actually known her and how quickly he's drawn her. Now, that said, the lead girl, the lead woman is played by Angelica Lee, and that actress is very charming in the movie. She's pretty, she's sweet, she has a certain energy or charm that really comes through on the screen and draws you in. So if you're just trying to tell me that he's just drawn to her because of her natural charm and beauty, I'll buy into that. I'll let that go. So it didn't really take me out of the movie too much because she really sold it. And not for nothing, the directors apparently agree with this because one of them married her apparently, and they are still married to this day. So that's an interesting little tidbit there, that this actually wound up being a romance for one of the directors too. So her charm very much on display. But what is the key to this movie, again, is that concept, this idea of being able to see the future, being able to see ghosts or tragedies and things like that through your new corneas is a really cool concept. And apparently it is based a little bit on a supposedly true story about a woman who did have some sort of visions or claimed to have visions, whatever, and wound up committing suicide. So that was a starting off point for part of the mystery of this movie. And I think that works out really well. And I think it comes through really, really well. There was also apparently a real life gas explosion that kind of inspired one of the major scenes in the movie here. And I think that's a really effective part too, because it's a very effective part in the movie. The movie doesn't shy away from some of the darker themes, things like suicide, things like mass tragedy and things like that, death. It really is focusing on some heavy stuff, and it doesn't shy away from it. It's pretty bold, and I think that it works out rather well. The same can't really be said for the American remake of it, the movie starring Jessica Alba that I don't think we've talked about on the channel before. And there's really not a whole lot to talk about. It's mostly notorious for not being a very good movie. It's really rather uninspired and Hollywoodized. They really, especially with the ending, gave it a very Hollywood ending. And it's not, it's like so many American remakes, it's inferior to the original, and it kind of feels a little pointless, really. It doesn't do anything new or interesting with the subject matter. The most interesting things about it are the things that are done better in this original Chinese version, and it's an interesting take on the whole supernatural aspect of this too. Like I said earlier, there is a whole supernatural theme throughout this video. You're going to see this in most of the movies, and this one, it's a Hong Kong movie, and it's a modern setting and modern science and everything like that involved in it, and yet it really does depend on and dive into like folklore, supernatural stuff, and goes really more into traditional folk beliefs and superstitions and stuff like that. And that makes it really effective. It's a nice blend of the two things. And while the American remake didn't really work out so well, there are apparently a couple of Indian remakes that I have not seen, but I bet you it works a little bit better there too, because again, that whole tie to the supernatural and the kind of cultural belief in or acceptance of or interest in the supernatural probably feeds a little bit better than it probably did in the American version. Maybe, and I'm just kind of hypothesizing at this point. I don't really know for sure, but for whatever reason, the American remake doesn't work for me. The Chinese version, the Hong Kong version, absolutely does. It's a really solidly made movie. It's got a really strong premise. It's got a really strong lead. It goes into some really dark places, which I like quite a bit. So I would recommend this one to check out if you haven't seen it already. I'm betting many of you have, or at least you've seen the American version. Don't let the American version deter you from checking out the original. It is much better. It is worth your time. It's easy to see why it's so well known and it was so popular. Popular enough, again, to not only have a bunch of remakes, but also to have multiple sequels, which from what I understand, I haven't seen them, but what I would understand is they are different stories that kind of in the same vein or same universe or something like that, many of which are directed by the Pang brothers themselves. So maybe it's worth checking out the entire franchise. I don't know. You tell me if you've seen the other movies in there. Let me know if I should be checking those out. But let's go ahead and keep talking about this movie in the comments below because it does warrant some conversation. It does have a lot of things to talk about. It's pretty interesting. So check it out if you haven't seen it before, and let's talk about it below. The next Chinese horror movie we're looking at today, the graduate level selection, is Dumplings. Dumplings came out in 2004 and was directed by Fruit Chan, and it's an expansion of Fruit Chan's short film or short piece of the Three Extremes movie, which is made as a three anthology vignettes along with Japanese director Takashi Miike and Korean director Park Chan-wook. It's a movie that, by the way, we will probably be talking about on the channel in the not too distant future. I don't think we've talked about it already, but it's a very good movie. And this is an expansion of his vignette from that movie. And it's interesting to see what he's done with it. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this full-length version of that vignette. First, if you haven't seen it before or are unfamiliar with it, the movie is about an aging actress whose husband is kind of losing interest in her and her career is maybe not going quite as hot. And so she's very interested in trying to stay youthful looking. And she meets a woman who is known for making age-defying dumplings. You eat these dumplings and they make you stay looking younger. But there is a secret ingredient that is rather difficult to get that is the key to this youthful look, this youthful magic, if you will. And this aging actress is so obsessed with her looks that she puts all that aside and dives right on into these hijinks that happen. And again, I'm going to stop so as to not spoil the movie, but this movie is a really fun movie in a really gruesome way. At least that's the way I'm going to put it. I think this movie is a blast because it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's also really gruesome and really dark in a lot of ways. So you've got the idea of this woman who's so desperate to stay young that she's willing to do some incredibly taboo things, to eat these dumplings that are made out of something really, really gruesome and really taboo and dark. And it's definitely a very touchy and maybe trigger warning worthy topic to be diving into in there. And yet this movie rides the line of being uncomfortably gory and disturbing and being uproariously funny at the same time. And it rides that line extremely well. Fruit Chan did work with Takashi Miike on Three Extremes, and I think some of the sensibilities may have rubbed off. Like, I'm more familiar with Miike and Park Chan-wook than I am Fruit Chan, but what he's doing in this movie is pretty extreme, and that some of the stuff that he's showing is really gruesome. But again, the tone of the movie is balanced out so well that it doesn't feel terribly gruesome to watch, at least for me. I don't know, maybe some people would differ with me on that one, but there's fair warning, there are some really intense stuff here. There's an abortion scene that's shot pretty up close, and you see fetuses and stuff like that. And so there's some other dark themes in here too. There's some incest and pedophilia stuff being dealt with in here. There's just a lot of taboo subject matter in here, but at the same time, it's all kind of done a little, not campy is not quite the word, but a little bit like playful. Like, so Bai Ling plays the woman who makes the dumplings, and she's great. And I don't really particularly care for Bai Ling, despite the fact that she was in The Crow. I don't really. She's not really. I'm not a fan of hers, but she is great here, and she's playing this character kind of big and kind of eccentric, and it really works in evening out the tone of this movie and making the movie not feel way too dark or way too depressing. She injects it with a certain energy that is makes it fun and makes it intriguing, and her dialogue is wonderfully psychotic and crazy and deeply disturbing, and the way she delivers it so almost playfully and almost matter of factly is wild. She is, I think, holding this movie together. All the other actors in the movie are very good too, but Bai Ling is really holding this movie together and making it feel darkly funny rather than overly gruesome. The leaning in on practical effects and this sick dialogue, and it really does lend itself to being too much for a viewer, a little too dark, too disturbing, too gruesome. So this gleefully demented gore kind of evens it out. It's like it's not taking itself too seriously and giving you permission to not take it quite so seriously as well. The effects and the makeup in this movie, coupled with this kind of demented dialogue, make for a movie that could be really kind of too off-putting, or really make them turn the audience's stomach and turn them off to the movie. But I think that this darkly funny, kind of almost gleefully, grossly comic movie or tone really kind of offsets that and balances everything out, makes it a lot more interesting to watch. And the way the movie's made, Fu Chan has done a really hell of a job with directing this movie. Like the food shots are so lovingly, beautifully shot. Like the camera work in this is wonderful. Like it's a little bit like food porn, honestly, the way he shoots the cooking and stuff like that. And then the sound design, like the composition of the shots is one thing; it's gorgeous to look at. But then there's the sound design, like the chopping and like the crunching of stuff. It's both like hypnotic and also just kind of like a little bit like kind of unsettling. It works really, really well. But it's not just like this kind of gruesome for gruesome's sake gore fest. It's trying to say something as well. It is some social commentary. Now, some of it's a little bit obvious, the idea of the pressure that women feel to stay young, especially actresses. So, a theme that was explored extremely well very recently in The Substance. This is the same kind of movie, and I would argue some of the same kind of tone, a little bit over the top and ridiculous in order to kind of get its message across in a kind of a fun but gruesome way. Very similar in terms of tone and concept and content to the Substance in terms of the gore and stuff like that. So if you like The Substance and you haven't seen Dumplings, probably would like Dumplings, but it also is kind of going into a little bit of a political commentary too, specifically China's one child concept that they had out, where you could only have one child, and then that led to mass abortions in the country. This is a Hong Kong movie again, and it's commenting on Chinese policy. And at first I thought they were just alluding to it, and I was kind of like, oh, that's a little bit interesting. But then they kind of outright spell it out. Bai Ling's character is a former abortion doctor, and she starts talking about having to relocate to Hong Kong and everything, and how things are legal and what she's doing to try to help the community and stuff like that. It's really interesting stuff. Really interesting commentary that, again, I'm not dialed into Chinese politics all that much or anything like that. I know enough to understand what they were talking about there, and I think the movie kind of tells you what you need to know. But it's interesting stuff. It's an interesting, challenging thing for this movie to take on. And, again, this is coming from a vignette that was made in Three Extremes, and they've fleshed it out here in ways to make it a little bit more deep and give it a little bit more substance without making it feel padded. They've extended it out, obviously. They've added a subplot or two. They've tweaked the ending a bit and stuff like that. So it does feel a little bit fresh. So even if you've seen Three Extremes, it's worth seeing Dumplings. I think it's a more well-rounded and deeper experience. Although I still think that the original is quite good too. So it's definitely worth your time. And if you haven't seen it before, I would recommend, if you're sensitive to pretty much anything, doing a little research first to figure out what's in this movie before you do it. Because, like I said, it's got some disturbing stuff in there, and it's not shying away too much from any of it. But if you aren't too bothered by that or put up by that, it's a wonderfully made movie with a really great central performance and a really cool balance of gruesome and funny that just worked for me, and hopefully will work for you too. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. And if you have, let me know what you think, because I'm pretty high on Dumplings. I think it's a really clever movie and it has a lot going for it. Maybe some people feel differently, but let me know in the comments below if you're one of them. And the last Chinese horror film that we're looking at today, the postgraduate level selection, is The Sadness. The Sadness came out in 2021 and was written and directed by Rob Jabaz, who I believe is a Canadian filmmaker, and this was his feature debut. And this is a Taiwanese film, but it is made, again, by a Canadian filmmaker, but it is made in Taiwan with Taiwanese actors, and it is an interesting adaptation, unofficial adaptation of a comic book called Crossed by Garth Ennis, but we're going to get into all of that a little bit more in just a minute. First, if you hadn't seen it before, the movie is about a pandemic that breaks out in Taiwan where people who could catch the disease start to lose all inhibitions and start to get this rageful, maniacal sadism, and they start acting out violently and committing all sorts of heinous crimes and doing awful things. And this young man is trying to find his girlfriend, and so they can try to escape together. And they're separated, and they're each kind of coming across some various gruesome hijinks. And we'll go ahead and stop there so not spoil the movie for you. But like I was saying, this movie is based on a comic book called Cross, and it's a comic book I'm familiar with that I liked quite a bit, from Garth Ennis, who is the guy who wrote the comic book Preacher, which was made into a TV show. And so if you're familiar with that, you get a little bit of an idea of what this is like. It's arguably more extreme even than Preacher. And extreme is the word that we're talking about here today. The actions that are taken by these infected people are extreme. Again, this is coming from the comic book. And again, to be clear, this is not an official version of the comic book. It's not an adaptation, but it's clearly inspired. It's clearly inspired because it is the exact same concept. This virus that goes around and basically drives people insane and makes them perverse, demented, like raping, murdering, pillaging maniacs. It's the same thing. And when I watched it, I didn't know that it was supposed to be based on Cross, but it was very clear that it was based on Cross. And then did the research for this video and confirmed, yes, it's clearly an adaptation of Cross. And it's, again, extreme. The stuff that's happening in this movie is very extreme and disturbing. And, we were just talking about dumplings and some of the dark subject matter that is tackled there. Dark subject matter being tackled here, too, and a lot more graphically, frankly. And that's one of the hallmarks of this movie and what made it so notorious here and even in the States. So it wound up debuting, I think, on Shudder and got lots of critical acclaim, got lots of love, got lots of buzz when this movie came out. And I was a little bit late to it, but when this movie came out, everybody was talking about it. And it is easy to see why, because it's so gleefully demented and gory, like the comic book is, just reveling in its gore. And we're using practical effects in this movie. The movie is like very sticky and gross, and it's practical for the most part. There's some CGI in there, but it's really done well and is really visceral and realistic feeling. And again, it's so depraved in everything that's happening in here. And the dialogue in this, again, is very sick. Like I talked about the playfully psychotic dialogue in Dumplings, and here it's really vulgar dialogue that's makes everything feel so much more eerie. You see these people that are ostensibly ordinary people get infected, and then they just start saying the most horrible things. And so as much awful stuff that's happening on screen, the stuff that's being talked about that's not happening on screen and is kind of off screen or left up to your imagination is even worse. It's not for everybody. It's a lot to take in. It's a rough movie in that sense, but it's also really, really good. Like I said, the effects are really great. The pacing of the movie is fantastic. You get right to business really, really fast. And the shock factor is high in this movie. But you're also invested in these characters and hoping they can get out and just kind of trying to figure out a way through this madness and like some light at the end of the tunnel. And I think the movie does a really good job of kind of teasing that light at the end of the tunnel and kind of trying to stretch out its message. And we'll get that to that. Let me put a pin in that for now. We'll get to that in a second. And they've got this central couple, and I think using them as your focus was a good idea. So you had somebody to kind of follow through and root for and kind of secondhand experience what they're experiencing with this madness that they're having to deal with. Now, the guy in the couple, the actor lacks some charisma. He's not terribly captivating. I didn't really care about him all that much, but the girl is really great. She really, and you follow her a bit more, thankfully, and she really sells this movie, and really you're rooting for her and you're buying into her, and the toughness and resolution that she finds during the movie is very satisfying. Like, not only are you rooting for her, she's getting better and tougher and smarter as the movie goes on, and she's very capable, and she's helping other people, and you just really like behind her. And I think part of that's the script, but also part of it's just the actress, and I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she really brings something to this role and makes it her own. She's like a model and everything like that. So you're thinking maybe she's gonna be like vapid or vacuous, something like that, and she's really not. She's a very wonderful character, and they do a really good job of having her be like your central heart of the movie, and it works out rather well. And I think maybe partly her being more of the focus than him, and him being kind of a secondary character, or maybe even subpar compared to her character, is possibly by design. One of the critiques of this movie, like the movie got a lot of critical love, but one of the critiques that it had was that there was no real message or meaning to the madness. It was just kind of there. It was like kind of violence and gruesomeness for violence and gruesomeness sake, and depravity just to be depraved, and like edgelord or something like that. It's a fair argument, I'll be honest, but I don't agree with it. I do think that there are themes in this movie and commentary in this movie. Like, first things first, it's about a pandemic, and it was made during the COVID pandemic. So there's obviously some social commentary there, especially with how the Taiwanese government is dealing with the pandemic, and how they don't treat it with enough urgency or care early on until it's out of control, and they are trying to get things on track. And so there's definitely like some political commentary, social commentary on that aspect to it. There's also a deeper social commentary there about people in general, and I think men specifically, and how they are not the greatest people anyways. And really, it's basically social morality and social norms that kind of keep people from being just overt monsters. And I think this movie kind of literalizes that. The train scene with the guy that meets our heroine on the movie on the train on the subway, and he's kind of hitting on her, and he's just not taking the hint, and he's being very persistent and pushy. And this is before anything happens in terms of the pandemic on that train, and it's wild to see the juxtaposition and then how unhinged he is after the infection. It's really making an interesting commentary. But frankly, that men are just kind of terrible anyways. Like, they don't need to have the virus to make them horrible people. They're horrible people. Men do this already, and now it's just like everybody's doing it, kind of thing. It's an interesting idea. I don't think it's maybe explored enough, frankly. I don't think that they dig into this too much. But then, on the other hand, that keeps it from feeling like too messagey of a movie, right? It is a theme you can extrapolate from the movie. It's something that's there, but it's not something that's hammered down and like hammered over the head. It's really just kind of there, but the movie keeps moving. The movie keeps going, and it's just kind of bringing you just really crazy stuff, really shocking violence, really demented things, and then this like tease of hope, but overall just this bleakness and this feeling of hopelessness in this movie that is really palpable, frankly. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit of a hard watch, not just because of the gore and the subject matter and the really taboo, awful things that are happening, but also because it kind of leaves you with a feeling of not hopefulness. You know what I mean? It doesn't leave you feeling great afterwards. But it's a great movie. It really is. It's easy to see why this got the buzz that it did. I really, really like this one a lot. Again, I was probably predisposed to liking it because I liked the comic books, the cross comic books. And again, you don't have to read them to know anything about the movie, none of that. It's just they are the same concept. But it really goes in some interesting and shocking places. So again, not going to be for everybody. Do your research before you check it out to see if it's for you. But if you are interested in it and check it out, I'd love to know what you think about it. I know a lot of people did see it. Like I said, it was pretty popular out here, had a lot of buzz, had a lot of critical acclaim. So if you've seen it, let me know in the comments what you think of it. I'm pretty high on it. And if you haven't seen it, again, viewer beware. But let me know what you think of it if you do decide to check it out. So those were our selections for the Chinese horror subgenre, but I've got a few extra credit ones to talk about too, because these movies were also really good and worth talking about. The first one I'm going to mention is Love Massacre. Love Massacre came out in 1981 and was directed by Patrick Tam and directed by Joyce Chan. And this is often described as a Hong Kong art house slasher movie, which is not an inaccurate description of it, but it's also a lot more. And its notoriety comes in large part from how difficult it was to see it for a very long period of time. But we're going to dig into all of that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, The movie's about a young woman whose roommate is suffering from some mental health issues, and her roommate's brother comes out to visit and see if he can help. The roommate winds up dying, and of course that causes some drama. And then the brother winds up sticking around, and he starts to fall in love with our main lead girl. But there's also a killer around, and people start to die, and hijinks start to abound. And I'm going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie too much. But this was a hard to find movie for a long time. And that's where a lot of the notoriety came from, is that you couldn't find it. It didn't get, it got like an old, digital release years and years ago, and it's been out of print ever since. And it kind of was like one of those things that people kind of knew about word of mouth, and you couldn't find, but now you can. It's a lot easier to find. Like somebody ripped a version off of a laser disc and put it on YouTube, and it looks pretty good, because it's very hard to find this movie, and it's even harder to find it in good quality. But somebody found a way to put it in decent quality, so now it's much more accessible. But it seems like a lot of people still don't really know a lot about it, and it's a shame, because it's a beautiful movie. It's a gorgeous movie. In fact, I would really like to see an HD transfer of this movie, because it's gorgeous. And that's a large part of what its reputation is based on, is how well shot this movie is, how interesting the angles are, the cuts, the cinematography is in general just great, but in particular, the use of color in the movie. The way the color is used thematically, like in terms of color theory, and also just visually, how the colors pop on the screen. It's gorgeous. The only drawback is that it's not the best of quality. Even this good quality one that's on YouTube is not great quality. You'd really like to see this in high definition, because you're losing something to the filmmaking by not having that. But even with that, you can appreciate how well made the movie is. Story-wise, it's a little hard to follow, honestly. It's dealing with mental health issues, and they're kind of nebulous. They don't really explain a lot about what exactly the mental health issues are, and you've got a crazed killer on the loose, and it's not really explaining a tremendous amount of motivation for that and everything. It's got a little bit of a mystery to it that really, honestly, doesn't matter all that much. But what's interesting about this movie is that for a large chunk of the movie, I'd argue maybe even 2/3 of the movie, it feels more like a romance. It feels more like, a kind of a bizarre roots love story. This woman falling in love with this guy who's grieving for his dead sister, who was her roommate, is a weird meet cute, if you will. But they're really trying to sell the romance between these two people, and it kind of works. And I don't think it's the most scintillating love story ever, but it's better than some of the other ones we've talked about earlier today. It's better than like the sadness chemistry or the eye in terms of that romance. So it's got that going for it. I don't know much about the filmmakers Tam and Chen, but they apparently are known more for doing kind of drama and romance and stuff like that, rather than horror movies. So I think that's kind of fun. If it's subverting the expectations of the audience, that's great. And then their secret weapon is they've got Bridget Lin in the starring role. And Bridget Lin, who was in Chungking Express, amongst many other movies, she's a pretty famous Chinese actress. She is wonderful here. She is beautiful. She is charming. She is interesting. She's doing really good work here. She's giving a really great performance, and she makes that whole first 2/3 watchable. Like I said, it may not be the most scintillating love story, but she really brings it home. Even though, again, her love interest is, he's dealing with some stuff, so you kind of understand why he is the way he is, but she's got enough charm for both of them, frankly. And she brings this movie to the finish line in a way that works really, really well. This movie has some giallo sensibilities, in particular because of the way the kills are shot, in terms of the way the color is used, in terms of some of the mystery aspects of it. It's also got a little bit of a Hitchcock comparison to it. Like a lot of the reviews you'll see will reference Hitchcock as well as giallo. And I see it. And I think it is kind of the Hong Kong version of, a Hitchcock giallo slasher movie. And that works for me. It works really, really well. The movie's not an amazing story. And if you're looking for a slasher where you get the kills every few minutes, this isn't the one. It's going to make you wait for that. But it's just a really well-made, well-acted movie that I think is a lot of fun. And it's a shame that it isn't seen more. And that's the main reason why I wanted to bring it up here, is it doesn't get seen much. It doesn't get talked about all that much. It's like a small cult following of people who really love this movie, including me. And nobody else seems to be even knowing about it, because again, it hasn't been re-released. It hasn't gotten any kind of like special HD release, Blu-ray release, anything like that, no re-release in theaters or anything like that. And it really deserves one. It's a well-made, gorgeous movie, really interesting, really pays off at the end, and it doesn't get enough love. So if you've seen it, let me know what you think, but I'm gathering a lot of you haven't. So I was going to say if you can find it, go check it out, but it should be relatively easy to find on YouTube. Love Massacre 1981. Put on the closed captioning for subtitles, and you should be good to go. And then let me know what you think of it, because it is a fascinating movie that deserves more eyeballs. The next extra credit movie I want to talk about is Mr. Vampire. Mr. Vampire came out in 1985 and is something very different than what we've been talking about in all these other movies. This is a Hong Kong action comedy horror movie directed by Ricky Lau, and it is a very influential and important movie in Chinese horror history, but we're going to get into all of that in just a minute. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about this Taoist priest and his two kind of inept and clumsy students who have been tasked with kind of keeping an eye on the dead and kind of keeping things simpatico. And they are faced with this infestation of jiangshi, which are apparently hopping vampires, hopping undead, that start to terrorize the town. And they are tasked with trying to find a way to save everybody before everything goes completely wrong. And of course, hijinks abound as they try to save everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop there so as not spoil it for you, but the movie is fun. And that's the biggest thing I can say about this, is that it's silly. It's not scary at all, but it's fun. Like, if you like Jackie Chan style action comedy stuff, this movie's probably going to work for you, because it's very much in that vein, intentionally so, and it works. It's a lot of fun. But the main reason we're bringing it up is because of how influential it was. Apparently, this movie was pretty big hit back in the 80s, and it spawned a whole franchise. It not only had a couple of sequels, but also spin-off movies that were similarly themed. It also had like board games, video games. There was a play made about it. It was a big deal, and they did a lot to try to work out different ways to milk the franchise for all it was worth. And frankly, it's easy to see why. It's a very fun, enjoyable film. Like I said, it's silly, right? It's leaning into the silliness. There's a lot of comedy bits in there that are, kind of simple, obvious, like almost Abbott and Costello-ish kind of comedy and stuff like that. You've got the whole bit where the guy mistakes the girl for a prostitute, and there's a whole thing where he's trying to hide that he misunderstood who she was. There's this whole thing about where there's this guy they're trying to prank, and they've got a way to control his body, and they're making him hit himself and slap himself, and eventually make him start undressing himself and stuff like that. And they're like very physical comedy of this, and it works. But where it's at its best is in the action scenes, in the choreography. And again, because they're played more for laughs than for cool factor, but they're still kind of cool. When they're fighting the vampires, who again hop around and look kind of silly, but also a little bit creepy in that sense, it works. But the fight scenes between our heroes and these vampires are fun. They're imaginative. Again, I keep coming back to Jackie Chan because that is kind of how it feels. And it's fun choreography. It leans into the silliness of it. It never gets tremendously scary, but there are stakes in the movie. But even the stakes oftentimes are played for laughs. Like the ghost that kind of takes over one guy is kind of creepy and everything like that. But it's ultimately played for laughs. His love sickness is played for laughs. And then the guy who's been infected, and whether or not he's going to turn into a vampire, something like that. It's definitely played for laughs, and so it's fun. Like, this is a kind of movie that I would argue is, kind of family friendly. It's really not terribly taboo or, anything like that. But it is leaning into interesting supernatural beliefs and folklore beliefs. And again, I'm really ignorant when it comes to Chinese culture and folklore and stuff like that. So I don't know a lot about these burial rituals and these, jianshi and stuff like that. I don't know anything about that. And the movie is not really interested in trying to educate you about it. It's kind of just expecting you to understand some of these things. And it's enough that you can follow the rules. Like, you understand why the glutinous rice is you don't know why, but you know it's a problem for the vampires, right? The glutinous rice is a problem for them. You can accept that. It tells you that. That's all you need to know. Where does that come from? I don't know. Doesn't matter. But it's fun. This movie never wants to get bogged down with trying to make the story too heavy or make it too deep. It wants to have a good time. It wants to make you laugh. It wants to thrill you. And I think it nails all of that. It's worth shouting out Lam Ching Ying, who is the Taiwanese priest in the movie, and how apparently popular his character was. And he's great. He's a scene stealer. He's a lot of fun. He anchors the movie. And apparently his character is kind of like a thing in Chinese horror for a while. Like he was a kind of a famous character that would even kind of transcend out of the genre and stuff like that. And so that's interesting stuff. This is all stuff I learned when I was doing the research, and it's interesting to see just how much of a cultural impact this movie had. It was a big hit. It spun off this whole Jiangxi subgenre in China. That's pretty neat. It's pretty neat, and that's kind of why I felt like I want to talk about here. I want to talk about it because it's a fun movie, but mostly because it seemed like it's a very influential movie in China, and I didn't realize that. It's a Hong Kong action comedy, and it kind of sparked the action comedy subgenre. That was a kind of a movement in Hong Kong for a while. The early use of special effects in this movie and like makeup and stuff like that apparently is a thing in the 80s. It's not, pre CGI and stuff like that. So we're not talking about that kind of stuff. But there was a lot of stuff that was done in there in terms of special effects, explosions and stunts and things like that, that apparently was kind of revolutionary for China at this time. So it's influential. And again, the stunt work is fun. It's really good stuff. There's some wire work and stuff in there that's really cool, but the main thing is just it's really well paced, well timed action that's fun and funny, and it's good. Again, it's not going to scare you. It's not going to creep you out. It's not going to do anything like that. But it's a good time. It's definitely worth your 90 minutes. It's definitely worth checking out. I think it's 97 minutes, but you get the idea. It's definitely worth checking out. And if you haven't seen it, please do. It's again not one that I think is a lot of people have seen, and it's an older movie, but it's a good time. So if you've seen it, let me know what you think. But again, check it out and come back and let us know your thoughts on it, because for me, Mr. Vampire is a really fun time. And the last extra credit movie I want to talk about is Incantation. Incantation came out in 2022 and is the highest grossing Taiwanese horror movie of all time so far. And that's pretty noteworthy in and of itself. But this movie also had a lot of buzz. If you look at Chinese horror best of, this movie gets brought up a lot. Again, partly because it's so popular, and partly just because of the quality of the film, which of course is something we're going to get into in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, this is a found footage style movie of a woman who is getting her daughter back after having spent some time in a mental institution, and she is trying to get her life back in order, but she's also suffering from some traumatic curse that's been placed on her family, and she's trying to find a way to keep her daughter safe from the curse. And there's a mystery unfolding as we go back in time a little bit to see what the origins of this curse is and how she might be able to defeat it. But of course, there's a lot of things in her way and a lot of obstacles and things to deal with. And of course, hijinks abound. We're going to stop there to not spoil it, but this movie is an interesting take on what I'll call a found footage version of The Ring meets like Antrim, and maybe with a sprinkle of The Grudge thrown into it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually pretty interesting. It's got a really cool concept, and where there might be a bit of an issue is the found footage format. Now, you know how I get about found footage. I can get a little nitpicky about these things sometimes. So what I like about the found footage format here is that there is an established reason for why she's filming. She wants to document these early days of reuniting with her daughter, to be able to look back on them and to kind of show her daughter, like, hey, remember what it was like when we were first, getting back together here. And also, I think, to validate or document her ability to be a good mother, because there's some questions about that. So I'm already there about there being a solid reason to film the video and by extension the movie, right? Where the movie gets a little interesting is that as you're flashing back between the past and the present, both in found footage format, there is, first of all, some confusion in terms of the timeline, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. And then there's this aspect where there are just times where you're seeing footage that can't exist. It's impossible. There's nobody there with a camera filming, but you were seeing it. Like, you're seeing, like, inside the car, there would have to be somebody sitting on the hood of their car filming them, and there's not. So things like that on one hand, kind of took me out of the movie a little bit, because I'm like, who the hell is filming at this time? It doesn't make any sense. But on the other hand, I almost would rather them do that than to try to make up a really goofy reason for them to be filming. Like, oh, let me put the camera here on the dashboard to film us while we're driving, which nobody would ever do, right? This movie just kind of says, like, screw it. We're just going to go ahead and give you these angles in found footage format and just roll with it, because we want to tell a cinematic story. Now, begs the question, why do it in the found footage format at all? Or why stick to the found footage format throughout the entire movie? Sure. But I kind of appreciate that they just said, you know what, we're not going to be bound by these found footage rules. We're just going to toss them out the door and just roll with it because you're having a good time. And for the most part, I am. So I'm kind of cool with that, right? The story is interesting. The the concept is interesting, and the payoff, I think, is pretty great. Now, I'm going to dance around this a little bit because I don't want to spoil the movie too much, but for the most part, you've got The Ring, right? You've got this video that was taken in the past when our hero was working as like a ghost hunter type series with her boyfriend and another guy, and bad things happened, and it was on video, and now anybody who watches this video is cursed and has a problem, and her daughter watches the video. This is all very much like The Ring, right? But it's also kind of like The Grudge in the way that it's like this whole the curse kind of stems from a family, and not for nothing, apparently it is based on a true story of a family that was kind of suffering from like a mass delusion and wound up like killing one of the daughters, and they were all like violently hitting each other, and they were all supposedly cursed. And so it's coming from a superstition that is a real thing in the country. This is a real Taiwanese superstition, although the religious stuff in this movie apparently is all made up for the movie, like the concept of the Mother Buddha and all this religious stuff, this religious iconography that is based on, is all made up for the movie. But the movie is kind of feeding off of superstition, folklore superstition in Taiwan, which again, I'm no expert on, but I'm following it enough in the movie to get what's going on, and it's very effective. The movie is shot pretty well for a found footage movie. There are some very disturbing scenes in here, some really creepy stuff. Like the creep factor is really good in this movie. The jump scares don't work for me quite as well. I find them to be a little cheap and a little obvious or whatever, but the creepy scenes work really well. You've also got this mother who is increasingly more and more desperate as the movie's going on. So you're buying into her motivations, you're buying into her behavior and her decision making, and that worked for me really well. And the actress playing her is doing a really good job. And then the kid starts acting creepy. And the creepy kid stuff works really well for me. The creepy kid is good in this movie. So that's working well for me too. The juxtaposition of going back in the past and seeing the stuff that led up to the mystery, and then seeing the present day stuff was a little jarring. It's a little hard to keep track of it. After a while, I started to get the rhythm of it, but at first it was a little jarring. Like it tells you went back 6 years ago, but then it starts bouncing back and forth, and it doesn't really, it looks the same. The footage looks kind of the same and everything like that. So it doesn't do a really great job of kind of distinguishing in this non-linear format what's happening. And I don't know that the non-linear format is super necessary or that adds a lot to the movie. I suppose it does allow the filmmakers to get things revealed in the pace they want to and at the moments that they want to. So there's that. But I think it might have made more sense to just film it chronologically or tell the story chronologically. But I don't know. I'd be curious to hear if any of you have seen it and have thoughts on that one, because I'm kind of two minds of it. But I do think maybe I might have helped to be more chronological, but that's just a thought on my part. But overall, that's kind of a minor nitpick, to be honest with you. The movie works. The movie is really, really good. It does a good job of setting the tone. It does a good job of setting some mood, and it's got some really fun, creepy scenes, like the scene where they're trying to drive to the temple place, and they kind of seem like they're driving in a loop. And it takes a little while to realize that that's what's happening. And then you're like, what are you going to do in that case? And they kind of start doing what I would do in this. So really effective, creepy scenes in this. So I really liked the filmmaking in this. I really think that the story, while kind of derivative in some ways, feels like they're making a fresh thing out of some of the derivations that they're taking. And then I think the ending is fantastic. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I really, really enjoy the ending of this. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a little bit, again, kind of going in like to the Ring storyline, but then kind of subverting it in a little bit of a different way that felt, as an audience member, really drew me into the movie, and I felt like it was a pretty effective payoff. So I like this movie very much. It's easy for me to see why there was some buzz on this one, why this one is talked about so fondly when talking about Chinese horror, because I think it really does measure up and is a really good example, and why it's probably so financially successful. So again, if you've seen it, let me know your thoughts on that one, especially about the time jump aspect of it, and let me know what you think of this. And if you haven't seen this one, check this one out. Again, it's got a little bit of dark stuff to look into on that, but not nearly as dark as some of the other stuff we talked about, and much more dark than Mr. Vampire, but it's definitely worth your time, definitely worth checking out. So if you haven't seen it, check it out for sure. So that's going to do it for our exploration into Chinese horror. Like I said, not necessarily the most robust of subgenres, but the good stuff is really, really good, and everything in this video is good stuff and is worth your time. So definitely explore Chinese horror if you haven't before. And if you've got some examples that I didn't cover in the video, leave them in the comments below. Maybe we'll talk about them in a future video, because there's a lot to mine here still that I think is just kind of like untold. It just doesn't get the buzz or the the exposure that it should. And I'd like to see more of that happen. That's kind of what we do here on the channel. So, and now what we do here on the channel is read a trivia pursuit card, a horror trivia pursuit card live on camera. And I'm going to try to answer it and hopefully not embarrass myself. And today we're going to look at the international category for obvious reasons. And the question is this. In 1999's Audition, what is the audition process meant to help Aoyama find? Okay, I know the answer to this question, and I think anybody who's seen Audition probably knows the answer to this question as well. And if you haven't seen Audition, then you're just taking a guess, I suppose. We did talk about Audition. Of course, I believe we talked about it in the J-Horror video. And it is a fantastic movie. It's notorious for a reason. It's well known for its gruesome violence in the movie, some really over-the-top crazy stuff that happens in that movie, and it's deserved of that reputation. But there's also a lot of other stuff that goes on in this movie that doesn't get talked about as much. Like the first half of this movie is a tonally different movie than the second half of the movie. There's a lot of different things going on in the first half of this movie that you would not expect based on the reputation of this movie. And if you didn't know anything about the movie and you were watching this movie, the first half of this movie would make you believe that you're watching a different kind of movie than what happens at the end of this movie. And that's the clue for you in this card, like this question, because the question in this card is talking about the first half of the movie. So if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, right? And if you haven't seen the movie, I don't know. I'm kind of giving you a little bit of a hint. Maybe it's too vague of a hint. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't give hints. I don't know. I do know the answer to this question. I'm, pretty much 100% sure I know the answer to this question. And I'm also just kind of giving you guys the answer, time to answer, think of your answer. But this movie, I don't think it gets enough credit for the tonal shift that it has in the movie and kind of the prank that it plays on its audience. I love it. And I think that this question is kind of the seed or the impetus of a much different movie than the movie you want to get in Audition. So I'll go ahead and stop there and stop prattling, let you lock in your answers. Now's the time. I've got my answer locked up and ready to go. So lock it in. Okay, so my answer is, of course, a wife. He's using the audition process to audition a potential wife for himself. And it kind of comes off like it's going to be a romantic comedy rather than an actual, horror movie. So let me just double check the question, the answer on the card. And the answer is a wife. A wife. So yeah, this one is, again, if you've seen Audition, I think it's a fairly easy one. That first half of the movie feels like it's going to be a romantic comedy, like a mute, cute thing. Like he's making all these actresses audition, and he's actually really looking for his wife. Cute. And then it goes very, very different. So if you haven't seen Audition, again, another one maybe check out before you watch it to make sure you're going to be able to handle some of the stuff in that movie, but it's fantastic. I love me some Audition. I think it's a great movie, and I know a lot of you do as well. I expect a lot of you got this answer right, and if you didn't get it right, let me know what you guessed, because I enjoy those wrong answers. That's going to do it for this week's video. Thank you for hanging out till the end. Once again, if you've got some cool suggestions, whether it's Chinese horror or anything, leave those in the comments, because I'm really enjoying checking out your guys' suggestions, your recommendations. Next week, we're going to be doing something different than this. But until then, class dismissed. Sadly, this is the extent of my knowledge of Chinese culture. It's delicious, though.